Hello and welcome to the Blood Reds Morning Bulletin. I'm joined by my fellow Liverpool.com writer, Dave Comerford. And today we're going to be talking about the lead up to the Everton game, where Jurgen Klopp potentially faces a few selection headaches. Would you think this is going to be a more rotated team, Dave, heading into, a very extensive period for Liverpool with the Champions League coming up and important games in the Premier League as well?
Yeah, I mean, the reality now for Liverpool is, having beaten Man City in the cup semi-final, it's going to be midweek until the end of the season now. So there is going to have to be a degree of rotation because of the volume of fixtures and the short turnarounds in between those games. So I think Klopp will look at this game, and we've seen him do it in the past. I think it's almost he maybe takes a little bit of the sentiment out of it. Given that he is kind of a foreign manager maybe, and he looks at it and he sees that Everton are, levels below Liverpool and thinks that this is an opportunity to rotate. We saw him do it, I remember, in 17-18. I think he did it around one of Liverpool's runs to Champions League final as well. So I think he'll say, right, this is a home game against a team in 17th in the table. This is an opportunity for us to keep some players fresh and, bring in some players who are kind of on the fringe of the first 11. So I definitely wouldn't be surprised, especially with Villarreal coming up in midweek, to see some changes on Sunday.
Absolutely, I think I agree. I remember a few years ago when he started Divock Origi in a Premier League fixture, and that worked out fine at the time. And Origi seems to have a good record against Everton. Do you think there's a potential for him to start the game? We haven't really seen him in the squad that much recently, but given we don't know the extent of Firmino's injury, is there a potential that we could see a surprise name in there?
Well, I'm not sure about Origi. I think obviously Firmino's injury improves his chances in a way, although you could argue the fact that Mane is being used as a centre forward now kind of is maybe more of a limit for him. One of the competitors even more versatile than they already were. So that makes it more difficult. Origi, I think, quite left field one. It's one of them where you look at Origi and Minamino and you think, are they actually going to have a chance to not only start a game, but play any significant minutes off the bench for the end of the season? Maybe not. If there was to be a game where that one of those two things could happen, maybe this is it. Especially if that sort of thinking comes into it of his decent record against Everton in the past. I think it'll be more likely to be the players who we have kind of seen recently, but only like in glimpses. So I'm thinking of players like Kanate, for example, coming in for Matip at the back. I think would probably be a change that Klopp makes for this one. Tsimikas as well, potentially. And maybe a change in midfield too. But I'd say, obviously, with Firmino injury, we've got fewer options up front at the moment. But I'd say we probably will see Jota come into the front line. I wouldn't be surprised if that was just like kind of one change from the game against Manchester United, rather than bringing Origi in. But who knows? He could start, and even if he doesn't, he could get sort of half an hour off the bench.
I think it says a lot about Liverpool's depth that we're talking about a player who hasn't really featured, and even if he starts against Everton, we'd still be confident of getting the result and getting the 3 points.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that says more about Everton than it does about Liverpool in a strange way. But yeah, I think historically his record against them, like you mentioned, has been really good. So that would probably make you feel more confident. And there's like this intangible thing with Origi as well. Obviously, it's looking like he's going to leave in the summer. It seems like an inevitability at this point. But there's like this intangible belief that I think a lot of fans have that he does have one more kind of big moment in him before he does leave, because obviously he's had this kind of succession of last minute winners and crucial goals. So, maybe this could be the game where that happens. I mean, you look at it historically, games against, Everton have been tight, even under Klopp, and even at Anfield, you've got the 1-1 draw in 17-18, obviously with the controversial penalty that Everton got. 18-19, that Origi goal, like we've already spoke about. 19-20, it was obviously more comfortable than last season with all the injuries we had. We obviously lost the game. So there could be a capacity for someone needing to be a hero. And especially with, Everton are pretty dreadful, but, they are also fighting for their lives for points. So you'd expect them to at least show a little bit more in the way of kind of character and resistance than maybe Man United did on Tuesday. So it could be a game that requires a hero. And I think, if he was to feature them, a lot of people will kind of bet on Origi to be the man.
I think that's a good point, actually. I've said that to a lot of people that I expect a stronger challenge against Everton than United, just purely because United were not fighting for anything. How much of an influence do you think that's going to have on Everton? The fact that they are, fighting for their lives. Some of these players are fighting for their careers and their reputation. So that could have an extra motivation on top of the fact that this is a derby and everyone is expecting them to win. Well,
Yeah.
not everyone in Everton is expecting them to win. Probably not a lot of people outside of Liverpool.
It's difficult because, obviously United on paper had something to fight for with the top four, but it seems like there was a little bit of resignation setting in and that they may be actually giving up on that and just kind of want the season to be over. Everton obviously don't even have that luxury. And I thought coming into it that the results in midweek were going to be interesting because you looked at the situation. Everton had obviously a bit of breathing room off the back of beating United and Burnley losing at Norwich. But Everton did manage to get a draw against Leicester, and that goal that they scored in stoppage time might be a big one. But obviously we saw Burnley win last night. So then the gap has closed again. So if there was any sort of notion that Everton could maybe afford to lose this game, I think that's kind of gone out the window now. Maybe if they'd come in sort of with a bigger gap, they could think, well, this is one of the hardest games there is. We can probably manage if we lose this and pick up points elsewhere. I think they can't have that mentality anymore, if that was an option. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think the thing with Everton is, they are fighting, and in their home games, we have seen that fight. But away from home, they're kind of a totally different team. In some respects, like their away record, I think, is potentially the worst in the league, or maybe the worst aside from Norwich or something. And I think almost if you can get the first goal in the game, or really, put them under pressure, maybe in the manner that we saw against Man United, they can kind of fold like it is in an Everton team with kind of bags of character. I think, they can harness the crowd at Goodison. We've seen them do that a few times, but away from home, I think they can kind of shrink a little bit. So whilst that they are going to be battling and there is going to be a lot of motivation in there for them, I think if you ask a lot of Everton fans, they still agree as well. I don't think they think that the team necessarily has the backbone to withstand kind of an onslaught from Liverpool. So that's kind of obviously encouraging from our point of view.
I suppose as well, when we're talking about motivation, there's probably even more motivation for Liverpool with the quadruple on the line, potentially fringe players or rotational players coming in who will be wanting to be more involved and looking to impress. So I suppose in that side, we tend to overlook that factor when it comes to Liverpool.
Yeah, well, you think about it, Konate, Tsimikas, Keita, I think Keita in particular, and Jota, if he starts in the front line, these are players who are now finding themselves kind of fighting for their place during the run-in. I think Konate has a chance of maybe starting some big games. Tsimikas less so, but Keita, certainly off the back of that display at Wembley, there's people starting to suggest that that's actually our best midfield without Jordan Henderson. So if Keita plays, can he make the case that that assessment's right and that he deserves to be starting in the big games? And Jota as well, who, despite having this brilliant goal-scoring season, all of a sudden is maybe facing a scenario where he's not in Klopp's strongest 11, which is quite mad. So can he kind of work his way back into that? So there are kind of those individual motivations. And one thing I would say is, I think, this fixture will always have edge because it's a derby. It's got more edge because of the situation both teams are in the table. But I think another factor on top of all of that is what happened last season with obviously Pickford, his tackle on Van Dijk, Richarlison's tackle on Thiago, we know the consequences they have for Liverpool's season, and then Everton winning the derby at Anfield as well. This is, I think, the first time Liverpool have had like the home game against Everton since then. Obviously, they had fans for the away fixture, but it was only the away support, the minority. So now having everyone in the stadium, I think there is going to be kind of the undercurrent of anger in there. I think some hostility towards those players that were involved. So I think that's going to take the atmosphere up a notch as well, and certainly give. I think the players will still remember that, because it's obviously recent enough, and it's the same group. So I think that's going to be sort of something that gives the game even more edge.
Absolutely. I think it was Salah who said after the United game to Thiago, like, if you enjoyed the atmosphere in this one, wait till Everton. It's going to be an exciting game, and I'm expecting a fierce derby, a proper derby game for this one. Thanks, Dave, for joining me. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure to check out the rest of the Blood Red content going out today and all the written content on Liverpool.com.